Current pleasure versus future pain, the economic trade-offs in Trump's America. America is making a dangerous bargain, and the tab may come due sooner than we think. Today's feel-good prosperity could cost us dearly in the future, and most people don't even realize the trade-offs happening right under their noses. But here's where it gets controversial. The United States, once built on the foundation of free markets and democratic norms, is seeing both tested in ways that could fundamentally reshape our nation's future. Picture how things used to work: millions of American consumers mingling with millions of producers, their choices in the marketplace determining prices, guiding resources, and fueling incredible economic growth. This decentralized freedom set the U.S. apart from countries ruled by dictatorial control, where the likes of Robespierre, Lenin, Stalin, Mao, and now Xi Jinping imposed top-down visions, often at an astronomical human cost. Not every nation enjoyed the blessings of liberty and justice baked into America's DNA. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Donald Trump is certainly not comparable to history's most notorious tyrants. However, he stands in strong opposition to letting market forces, those natural push and pull interactions between buyers and sellers, decide prices and resource use. For example, no matter that consumers are evidently pleased with how Walmart prices over 120,000 different items, making it the country's largest retailer, today even corporate giants like Walmart are forced to factor in warnings from Trump to eat the tariffs instead of passing costs to shoppers. He's not shy about telling businesses exactly how to set prices, either. But this is the part most people miss. The White House has directed health officials to set explicit price targets for pharmaceutical companies. Mattel has been threatened with 100% tariffs if it dares raise toy prices. Trump bluntly says, "You won't sell one toy in the United States." Amazon, too, is told that hiking prices could be seen as a hostile and political act. That's a direct challenge to the market-driven principles championed by economists like Milton Friedman. Is government interference truly the answer, or could this set a risky precedent? And controversy doesn't stop there. Regulatory policy in Trump's America often reflects the personal and financial interests of those at the top. Fiscal policy appears increasingly tolerant of ballooning deficits, even as national debt soars. Economists stress that when the economy is doing well, it's time to reduce deficits or at least slow their growth. Instead, current policies have weakened the dollar and nudged fears about its role as the world's reserve currency. Inevitably, unchecked deficits could bring about the very high interest rates that the president wants to avoid. Should we be worried? Let's not forget monetary policy. Trump's blend of supreme confidence and sometimes shaky economic knowledge drives him to wrestle control of interest rates from the independent Federal Reserve. As tariffs push up prices on furniture, clothing, household goods, and produce, he's pressing for a dramatic 2-point drop in rates. The Fed's chairman, Jerome Powell, finds himself the last major barrier between Trump's ambitions and ultra-low, even negative, real interest rates that could result if inflation keeps rising. What does this mean for everyday Americans? Is cheap money worth the risk if inflation spirals out of control? But here comes another flashpoint: it's not just economics at stake. Trump's readiness to bend constitutional restraints and traditional checks and balances is just as striking, maybe even more lasting. For instance, he's confronted universities, urging them to battle anti-Semitism by overseeing staff choices. Federal law enforcement has been sent to handle protests that local agencies struggled with, overriding states' rights when deemed necessary, and clamping down on participation in women's sports by transgender athletes. Is accepting such power grabs justified if the end goals seem worthy? Where should America draw the line? And yet, here's the twist: despite the potential dangers of moving away from both open markets and constitutional norms, there's a surprising surge of optimism in the air. Top business leaders, like J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, are scrapping previous predictions of a recession. Corporate investment is on the rise, committed to keeping the U.S. at the forefront of technological revolutions like AI. Delegates from 70 countries are flocking to Washington, eager to secure access to the world's most dynamic market. Financial markets tell the story, too, stock prices reach new heights, critics' doomsday warnings fall flat, and bond vigilantes seem to have parked their worries for the time being. Perhaps most telling, more Americans seem to accept the president's rough-edged, norms-defying approach as part of an overall package they're willing to tolerate, even support. And you can sense this optimism everywhere. Ask workers, and 74% will tell you they enjoy their jobs. Airlines report record-breaking travel for Labor Day, and New York's theaters and museums buzz with unprecedented tourist crowds. For many, there's a belief that the president understands, and fights for, their values on key cultural debates. In the end, everything in life is a trade-off. Right now, America is opting for present gains by running larger deficits, in exchange for the risk of future economic hardship. We're shifting away from free market mechanisms toward centralized oversight from the White House, and choosing costlier economic independence over relying on competitors abroad. So here's the big question, and perhaps the most controversial point of all: are Americans willing to continue exchanging tomorrow's stability for today's comfort? Will voters reward or reject these choices in the upcoming November midterms? Where do you stand? Is the current optimism justified, or are we just postponing an inevitable reckoning? Let's hear your thoughts. Agree or disagree, your perspective matters. Erwin Stelzer is a business advisor. America's misunderstood trade war. The United States, once the champion of global trade, now finds itself in the midst of a trade war instigated by President Donald Trump. This move seems counterintuitive, given that America was the primary architect of the post-World War II liberal trading order, which ultimately led to the globalized economy that Trump is now attempting to dismantle. However, this hostility towards global commerce is not a mere psychological quirk, but rather a reflection of America's long-standing ambivalence towards trade. This ambivalence, fueled by a fear of American decline, has led to a demand for barriers to protect the nation from perceived external threats. This narrative first emerged in the 1980s, centered around fear of Japan's rising trade surplus and global market share in industries once dominated by American companies. This period also shaped Donald Trump's views on trade, leading him to believe that Americans were being taken advantage of by the world. While the fear of Japan was largely misplaced, as the country's economic decline in the 1990s demonstrated, a new threat emerged in the East: China. The threat posed by China's large trade surplus with the United States has influenced economic policy since the administration of George W. Bush. Trump further escalated this by putting China squarely in the crosshairs and using the sense of peril to argue that any nation with a bilateral trade surplus was an enemy. The popular interpretation of the China shock is leading the United States down a self-defeating path. While Chinese imports did cause job losses in communities whose industries competed directly with Chinese manufacturers, they also created windfalls for innovative manufacturers and raised the competitiveness of other American companies. The rise of China does present new challenges, but the solution is not to erect a wall around the entire American economy. The shock from China also pushed the American economy toward a higher value equilibrium based on inventing and designing new systems and gadgets, which added highly paid jobs in research, development, and design. Research finds that China created more jobs across the